Hi, I'm Fallon. My parents told my sister's kids to eat first and told mine to wait for crumbs. Not once, not by mistake, but like it was normal. They looked right through my children, like they didn't belong at the table. And for years I stayed silent, thinking maybe next Sunday, maybe next time. But that night, when they did it again, I finally stood up. And what I found out after that, crumbs were just the beginning. It was one of those Houston afternoons, humid enough to weigh on your chest like regret. My parents' backyard had been trimmed, the plastic fold-out tables laid out in familiar symmetry, and the smell of over-salted brisket mingled with the scent of fresh-cut grass. A typical Saturday reunion. Forced smiles, practiced laughter, the kind of gathering that looked picture-perfect, if you didn't listen too closely. I parked at the curb and sat in the car a moment longer, watching Callie's minivan already parked in the driveway. Her kids would be inside by now, laughing, probably halfway through a can of soda I would never let mine touch. I breathed deep, painted the polite expression I'd perfected over the years, and stepped out. Inside, it was warm and loud. My parents, Elaine and Gary, moved about in their choreographed chaos, setting out paper plates like it was Thanksgiving. Callie was holding court near the kitchen island, laughing too loud at something Dad said. Her husband, Rick, wasn't even here, and hadn't been the last 3 reunions, but no one mentioned that. The grandkids were summoned first, of course. Callie's twins were ushered toward the buffet line, their plates heaped with barbecue, mac and cheese, and cornbread before anyone else had even stood up. "Let's make sure the little ones get enough first," my mom chirped, casting a side glance toward my 2 kids who stood behind me like shadows. I smiled thinly. "They're little too." Sure, Dad added without looking up. But Callie's had her hands full, working those extra shifts at the hospital. I bit down the response that rose. My kids weren't invisible. They just weren't hers. When we finally moved toward the food, half the tray of chicken was gone, and my youngest, Emmett, whispered, "Do we wait every time?" "Let's see what's left, honey," I said. I didn't meet his eyes. It wasn't new. Not this time, not the last. Callie's children had always been bright, spirited, a handful. Mine were quiet, shy, polite, a polite way of saying overlooked. They learned to be small because I'd shown them how. Years back, when I first moved back in state after the divorce, I thought maybe being near family would give my kids a sense of belonging. What I hadn't realized was how loudly absence could echo even in a full room. We sat around the long table in the dining room, kids squirming, plates clinking. Callie's youngest spilled juice and was met with chuckles. When Emmett accidentally dropped his fork, my mother winced. "Careful, sweetie," she told him, but her tone was scolding. Callie turned to me. "So, you thinking of going back to work soon? Or still doing the freelance thing?" "It's copy editing," I replied. She nodded like I'd said, selling Tupperware. Mom jumped in. "Well, Callie's been clocking 60-hour weeks, haven't you, hun?" "Oh, it's nothing," Callie smiled. "You do what you have to for your family." And there it was, the not-so-subtle undertone. "You chose your path." Dad chuckled. "Should have stayed with that husband of yours. Might have made things easier." I swallowed the bite of cornbread like it was gravel. Emmett glanced at me, confused. I smiled like I'd always smiled. But inside, the familiar throb in my throat wasn't grief anymore. It was something harder, heavier. I looked around the room. The framed family photos on the wall. None of them included my children. I'd always told myself it didn't matter. That we were stronger than snapshots. But when Emmett tugged my sleeve and whispered, "I'm still hungry," something inside me cracked. Maybe it wasn't crumbs they were giving us. Maybe it was silence I'd been feeding them. And I was done. That was when it happened. Emmett, voice louder this time, looked straight at my mother and asked, "Why do they always eat first?" "We're hungry too." The room went quiet. Callie made a face like she'd tasted something sour. My mother blinked. My father set down his fork like it offended him. "Emmett," I said, trying to sound calm. But my voice wobbled. He didn't stop. "We always eat last," he said again. "It's not fair." "You watch your tone," Dad snapped. Callie snorted. "Kids repeat what they hear, you know." I didn't defend him. Not then. Not yet. I was too shocked, not by Emmett's words, but by the fact that he had the courage I hadn't shown in years. Later, I walked him out to the porch. The sun was dipping. Cicadas hummed in the distance. "I'm proud of you," I said. He looked up at me, uncertain. "You were right to say it," I told him. "They don't get to make you feel small." He nodded slowly. I brushed his hair back and sat beside him on the swing. The wood creaked beneath our weight. My grandmother used to say, "Sugar hides the rot." I never understood what she meant, until now. I turned to glance at the house, laughter still faint through the windows. I was done feeding them sugar. The morning light slanted through the blinds like a silent accusation. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, while the air conditioner kicked on with a soft whir. Emmett was still curled up beside me, his face soft in sleep, unaware of the storm his little voice had stirred the night before. His words repeated in my head, each time sharper. "We always eat last." It's not fair. It wasn't the volume that got me, it was the truth in it. There was pride in me, yes, that he spoke what I never dared. But also shame, deep and bitter, that I hadn't stood beside him when he did. I'd let my own child be scolded for noticing what I'd spent years pretending not to see. My phone buzzed. A message. "Just Callie. Next time, teach your boy some manners." That was it. No, "good morning." No context. I stared at it for a second, thumb hovering, then hit delete. The silence that followed said more than the text ever could. Manners. That's what we taught to stay quiet in broken homes. To keep from rocking the boat even when it's sinking. I sat up and pulled the curtain back. The sun was already brutal, blazing down on a street full of quiet houses. It looked peaceful, but I'd learned peace wasn't always real. Sometimes it was just control, wrapped in a smile. By mid-morning, I'd made up my mind. I didn't plan it, I just got dressed, made Emmett some toast, told him I had errands. Then I drove straight to my parents' house. The porch looked the same as always, Dad's tools scattered neatly, Mom's ceramic frog still perched by the steps. I knocked once and let myself in. That was the rule here. You didn't need permission, just politeness. Mom greeted me at the door with a too-wide smile. "Fallon, well, isn't this a surprise?" I was just putting on another pot of coffee. "I won't stay long," I said. "Oh, nonsense. Sit, let me get you some." She was already in the kitchen before I could answer. That was her way, control the moment, keep it moving, don't let the quiet settle too long. Dad was out on the porch sanding something, head down, listening without looking. I sat at the kitchen table. The coffee clinked in my cup before she spoke again. "You know how Callie is," she said, like that explained everything. "It's easier if you just let things go." I watched the steam rise from the mug. "That's exactly the problem, Mom." She stopped mid-stir. "We all let things go, and somehow, they always land on me." She didn't respond, just turned to rinse the spoon, slowly. Her back to me said enough. I left without finishing the coffee. As I passed through the living room, something caught my eye, a thick manila envelope, half tucked under the old leather-bound ledger my dad used to balance bills. It was wedged in the sideboard drawer, barely visible. I reached for it. No real thought, just instinct. Inside was a check, several $1,000s, addressed to Callie. The memo line read, "Support for the kids, from Fallon's contribution fund." I stared at it. My breath stuck somewhere between my ribs. Contribution fund? I'd been sending money every month, small amounts, enough to help with what they called Mom's prescriptions, Dad's blood work, a few home repairs. Never questioned it, never thought I needed to. And there it was, my name, used to fund Callie's lifestyle. Her kids' summer camps, their matching Christmas pajamas, their extra slices of pie. My hand trembled. I put the check back exactly where I found it, closed the drawer, walked out. The sun outside had gotten harsher, but I didn't feel it. The drive home was quiet. No music, no radio, just the hum of the engine and a dull roar in my head. My grandmother used to say, "The devil doesn't always shout, sometimes he whispers through family." I used to think it was just one of her old country sayings, meant to scare children straight. Now it felt like prophecy. Every dinner, every holiday, every slight I brushed off like lint on a jacket, came rushing back. The puzzle pieces didn't just fit, they clicked in place like they were made to. That check wasn't about money. It was about power. It was about how long I'd let myself believe my silence was strength. They didn't just take my kindness. They built their comfort on it. But I wasn't going to rage. Not now. Not anymore. That night, after Emmett went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The light overhead flickered like it always did when the AC kicked on. I pulled out a fresh notebook, one I'd kept for grocery lists and nothing more. And I began to write. Every payment, every gift, every instance I said, "It's okay." Every time I stepped back so someone else could step forward. I didn't write with anger. I wrote with clarity. This wasn't a confrontation. Not yet. Let them think I was still the quiet one. I glanced down the hall at Emmett's room. His nightlight glowed under the crack of the door. "You'll never eat crumbs again," I whispered. The sunlight filtered in through the kitchen window, making the coffee steam rise in thin trails. I sat at the table with my notebook open, but today I wasn't scribbling grocery lists or deadlines. I was rewriting my story. For years I had followed the script: quiet daughter, helpful mother, invisible partner. Now I was sketching a different version, one with questions, not apologies. I listed the moments, birthday weeks when my name came last on the card. Times I'd covered bills for my parents' medical emergencies, and watched the recognition go to someone else. I wrote down who was present when Callie was praised for saving the day, and when I was congratulated for just keeping quiet. I remembered my mother's look. It was polite, but empty. The words, "You're always trying to be the hero," resonated like a plate cut for someone else. That quote came back to me: when the lies are loud, let your truth be deliberate. I closed the notebook and clenched my fist. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to demand. I was going to act. Later I met Aunt Maeve. We sat in the corner booth of the barbecue diner, a place where the walls smelled of smoke and old conversations. Maeve poured black coffee and looked at me straight in the eye. "Your mother never changed," she said. "She only learned to make kindness the mask for control." I felt the words land deep. She told me how my mother and Aunt Maeve once fought over who got the house key first, and how the family dealt in favors disguised as love. "Your sister," Maeve said, "was trained to be the voice your mother couldn't risk using. She'll say what Elaine won't." I remembered Callie's easy laughter, her perfect answers, her applause from Dad. It wasn't random. I sat there and realized I had been the chapter they skipped. Maeve's final line cut soft but real: "Don't argue with ghosts in their house. Build your own damn porch." I left the diner with that echo and pulled into the car, grit in my throat and purpose in my bones. When I got home, something pushed me to open the laptop. I logged into the old email account I seldom used. The inbox recited years of quiet. I found a thread, a laugh, a joke, a disparaging note between Mom and Callie about me, always needing to save everyone, and maybe she's born to be the quiet one. There it was in black and white. The fund I sent monthly, labeled Fallon's contribution, funneled into Callie's lifestyle. I screenshotted it. My hand didn't shake. I stared at the screen and uttered, "They don't see me as family. They see me as currency." For the first time the words felt less like grief and more like declaration. I went back to the notebook and erased the phrase, "I forgive you already." I replaced it with, "I want accountability and autonomy." I drafted a letter to my parents, not to send yet, but to state what I would no longer tolerate. I scribbled a list: no more silent checks. No more unsent apologies. No more pretending I don't see the parts of me they erase. Outside the window, dusk arrived. I heard Emmett laughing in the living room. Lark humming a song from school. I paused and breathed in that ordinary sound. I realized their laughter could be louder than the whispers I had swallowed for so long. A soft knock at the door startled me. I paused in the hallway. My niece Lainey stood there, eyes wide, holding a thumb drive. "I think you should see what my mom's been saying about you," she said, voice low. My pulse tripled, but I didn't rush. I opened the door fully and let her in. On the kitchen counter, I placed the notebook, the printouts, the stack of evidence I'd gathered. Silence wasn't my avoid zone anymore, it was my weapon. I stood in the doorway watching them come into my safe space. I felt the weight of years, but I also felt the looseness of my posture, the widening of my shoulders. The hallway light flickered. I knew I was done waiting for someone to hand me power. I was taking it. I passed the blue mailbox as I drove past my parents' house, the same sturdy shape I'd seen every time I returned home. The oak tree stood tall in the front yard, its toys scattered beneath as though they were left behind forever. I remembered myself sitting on that porch, long after dinner, waiting for words I never heard. I felt grateful, still invisible. And it dawned on me that gratitude had become my quiet prison. I drove slower than usual. I let the afternoon heat linger on the windshield while I thought about what I'd accepted, always doing the work, never getting the credit. The porch swing creaked in memory, under the weight of children's laughter I'd tried to join but who never offered me a seat. I recalled a line I once read, "You don't have to scream to be heard, just find the right frequency." That frequency had been theirs, not mine. And I realized I could change it. At lunch in a tiny diner near Kirby Drive, I sat across from my mother and sister. I'd asked them out under the guise of catching up. The coffee warmed my hands, but not my mind. My mother's smile was generous, but not real. My sister sipped iced tea as if she'd trained for the scene. I took a breath. "Mom, do you remember the house I financed when I got promoted 3 years ago?" I asked. Her brow furrowed. "Yes, thank you," she said, softly. Then I delivered. "And do you remember that when it appeared in the local newsletter, I wasn't acknowledged?" My sister's smile faltered. My mother placed her spoon carefully, glancing down. "When you told my kids they had to wait, while yours ate first, that wasn't an accident. It was a message." Silence grew heavy between us. I saw the shift. My mother offered another coffee. I waved it away. My sister's face was tight. I stood and gathered my things. "I'm choosing the frequency now," I said. I left before they could respond. The table behind me started anew, the sounds of cutlery reaching my ears as I walked out. Later at home, I sat at my desk and pulled out the letter. I began writing, effective immediately, "Any request for tuition, hand-me-downs, gifts will be paused until respect is restored." I labeled a folder on the shelf, "Family Archives," for them, not me. I knew it wasn't about the money. It was about being looked at. It was about voice. I glanced at Emmett's school photo on my wall and whispered, "We will not sit at the leftovers table." That evening, dinner ended in soft cartoon murmurs. I packed up quietly while the TV flickered. I didn't announce. I opened the front door. Emmett followed. He asked, "Mom, where are we going?" I said, "We're going where we're treated like family." I glanced back at the house with the familiar porch swing, then got in the car. I drove away, toward a place not yet built, but one I would define. Sunday started with the sound of my phone buzzing against the nightstand. I knew that vibration too well, family group chat. I rubbed my eyes and opened it, half awake, already bracing myself. The messages stacked one after another like they'd been rehearsed. "We're all just trying to get along. Don't take things so personally. You've always been so sensitive." I stared at the screen. Same tone, same game, sugar-coated control. I used to reread these words, trying to find where I went wrong. But this time, something inside me stayed still. Detached. I could see it now for what it was, manipulation wrapped in manners. I typed slowly, my fingers calm. "Let's not pretend kindness when there's none being practiced." Then I set the phone down, face down, and exhaled. Emmett walked in rubbing his eyes, dragging his old blanket behind him. "Mom, are we going to Grandma's today?" I smiled softly. "Not today, love. We're choosing peace today." He tilted his head, like he didn't fully get it but trusted I knew what I was doing. I made breakfast, the smell of coffee and toast filling the quiet. For once, that quiet felt earned. Later, I sat at the kitchen table paying bills when a notification popped up on my laptop. Bank alert. Account access change. My stomach tightened, but I clicked. It was the joint account, Mom's name and mine. The one we used for family expenses, emergency repairs, holidays. I logged in. Denied. I tried again. Same result. Then the email appeared. Access restricted. Contact your bank for details. I called immediately. The woman on the phone had that tone, kind but distant. "Yes, ma'am, it looks like your name was removed as an authorized user last week." The request came from the primary account holder, Mrs. Elaine Carter. My mother. I clenched the edge of the counter. "I didn't authorize that. I understand. Unfortunately, since you're no longer on the account, I can't discuss the details. I ended the call before my voice could shake. Then I went back to the laptop and started pulling old statements, downloading every record I could. My name showed up in every deposit, rent payments, utilities, groceries. But the withdrawals? Mostly Callie's. Vacations, online orders, things that had nothing to do with family. The betrayal was cold, efficient. Not emotional. Just paperwork and signatures. They think'll break, I whispered, staring at the screen. But I built myself from nothing once. I can do it again. As the sun climbed higher, I pulled old boxes from the closet to find files I needed. One of them was heavier than the rest. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was a hand-stitched quilt. My grandmother's. The sight of it stopped me. I hadn't touched it in years. Mom called it tacky once and told me to put it away. But I remembered the night Grandma gave it to me. She said, "This will keep you warm when nothing else does." I unfolded it, ran my hand over the uneven stitches. It smelled faintly of cedar and dust. When I wrapped it around my shoulders, something in me steadied. I caught my reflection in the window. "You saw me before anyone else did," I whispered. The quilt didn't make me feel small. It made me feel rooted. Like strength didn't always have to roar. Lark came in quietly, watching. "It's old," she said, running a finger over one of the seams. "It is," I said. "But it's strong. Just like the woman who made it." She smiled and leaned against me. I didn't tell her, but I decided right then, it would be hers someday, along with the truth of where it came from. That evening, the light softened, and I gathered both kids in the living room. The TV murmured in the background. "Sometimes," I began, "people we love don't always treat us right. And when that happens, we have to set boundaries. Even with family." Emmett frowned. "But they're family." "I know," I said gently. "And we can still love them. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them keep hurting you." Lark asked, "What if they get mad?" "Then we'll stand together until it's safe again," I said. The room went quiet, but not heavy. Just honest. Then Lark climbed into my lap and whispered, "You're the strong one in the family, Mom." I kissed her hair. "Maybe. But strength isn't about fighting. It's about knowing where to stop." When they were asleep, I went back to the kitchen. The quilt was folded on the chair beside me. I opened my laptop again and started typing an email. To Mom and Callie, I wrote. "I know about the account. I know the signatures. I know what you took. But I also know what you'll never own again, my silence." I read it twice. Then I sat back, hands still on the keyboard. The house was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. I didn't send it. I didn't need to. The message had already been delivered, to myself. I saved the draft under one title, Truth, Unsent. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the kitchen light, and stood there for a long moment, breathing in the stillness. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to apologize. I didn't need closure. I'd drawn my line, and that was enough. I pulled into my parents' driveway just before sunset, the porch light already on. That same light had once meant safety to me, a kind of welcome home. Tonight, it felt like a warning. The house looked exactly the same, but I wasn't the same woman walking through that door. I'd spent the afternoon combing through years of statements, every check, every wire, every quiet sacrifice I'd made to keep this family's home standing. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to see things clearly, finally. Dad greeted me with that half-hearted warmth he saves for company. "You made it," he said, as if I might have forgotten the invitation. I smiled. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. My voice was steady, though I could see in his eyes that he already felt a shift. Elaine barely looked at me. Callie hovered behind her, smiling the way people do when they're waiting for a show to start. I sat down at the long dining table, my kids beside me. The scent of roast chicken filled the room. Everything looked perfect, until I asked casually, "Dad, you ever wonder how much I've put into this place since 2015? He blinked, pretending not to hear. "What do you mean?" he said. I looked straight at him. "I mean, would you like to see the ledger? Every dollar I've given?" His fork paused midair. Elaine shifted in her seat. Callie reached for her water glass, pretending to look uninterested. Dinner moved on, small talk and laughter floating around like perfume. Then my mother's voice rang out, bright and too cheerful. Before dessert, we have a little surprise." She nodded toward the hallway, where a cloth-covered frame leaned against the wall. "Callie, would you do the honors?" My sister stood and pulled the cloth away. A polished brass plaque gleamed in the light. It read, "Family Legacy Wall, gifted by Marlena Joy." I froze. The house I'd financed. The money I'd wired. The nights I stayed up writing checks so my parents wouldn't lose this roof, all credited to someone else. I stared at that wall as if it had slapped me. The air went thin. My daughter's small hand slid into mine. "Mom?" she whispered. I didn't answer. My father cleared his throat. "Venora wanted to stay behind the scenes," he said, smiling toward the guests. My mother nodded quickly. "She's always been the quiet one." Their words rolled through the room like poison, soft, polite, and cruel. Inside, something in me cracked. But it wasn't anger this time, it was focus. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the plaque. Then I sent it to myself, to my backup drive, to my private folder. Evidence. My first strike. Quiet, but deliberate. When I finally stood, the room went still. "Let's raise a glass," I said. "To legacy and truth." I lifted my wine, my voice calm and even. To every late payment I covered, to the renovation I paid for, to the scholarships, the roof repairs, the endless giving that didn't fit on that plaque. Callie slammed her napkin down. "You're making this about money," she snapped. I met her gaze. "No, Callie. I'm making it about respect." For once, no one spoke. My father's jaw tightened. Elaine looked at her plate. The air around us trembled. I set my glass down, slowly, the sound sharp in the silence. The illusion of harmony shattered right then. Later that night, after the plates were cleared and polite goodbyes exchanged, I drove home with the windows down. The air was cool. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't sad. I was awake. When I walked into my house, I opened my laptop and started a new folder, Our Legacy. I began scanning documents, photos, proof. Then I closed the joint account that tied me to my parents' finances. I called an accountant, left a voicemail. Lark came into the room in her pajamas, holding her quilt. "Mom," she said, "are we still family?" I knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "Yes, honey, we're family, but we're building a different table." She nodded, holding the quilt tight. I told her, "One day, your grandchildren will see our name where it belongs." After she went to bed, I placed the quilt across her blanket, smoothing it out like a promise. I glanced once more at the photo of the plaque on my phone. The porch light at my parents' house might still be on, but I was no longer waiting under it. I was moving, slowly, quietly, but in the right direction. The parking lot buzzed with chatter as we walked in, me, Lark, and Emmett. The community center was lit up like it was expecting royalty. Maybe it was. But my hands weren't shaking. Not anymore. I wasn't here to prove anything, I was here to reclaim what they tried to erase. Lark wore her navy blue dress, the one she saved for special grown-up events. Emmett kept asking questions. "What's a silent auction? Do I have to dance?" I just smiled, answered, but my mind was somewhere else. Inside, I greeted old neighbors, parents from school, church folks. They looked me in the eye now. "Fallon, good to see you," they said with that nod, like they saw something new. Or maybe something I'd stopped hiding. The quilt was folded neatly in my purse. Not for display. For me. Across the room, I spotted Callie. She was surrounded, camera flashes bouncing off her pearl necklace. She leaned in too close when she laughed. Always too close. I took a deep breath, exhaled slow. This wasn't her show. Not anymore. We found our table and settled in. I let the kids explore the snack table. I wasn't there to hover, I wanted them to see me hold space. To see how it's done. Then the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. The MC cleared his throat and introduced the next segment, the Wall of Thanks. I clapped politely. They started with bronze donors. Then silver. Then, family supporters. And now, the MC said, "Please join us in recognizing a loyal contributor, Venora B." Venora? My applause slowed. A photo popped onto the screen, my donation. I knew it. I remembered that day, the check, the letter I'd sent in with my name typed in full. Then came another slide. Marlena J. with a donation sum triple mine. But that amount. That was mine. The exact figure. Lark touched my arm. "That's Your picture, she whispered. I didn't move, not at first. The air in my lungs got tighter. Across the room, Callie blinked twice, then forced a smile. I stood. My heels hit the floor like punctuation marks. People turned. I walked forward, straight back, shoulders up. The MC held out the mic, confused. I took it without asking. Thank you for acknowledging support, I began. My voice didn't shake. But real support isn't about plaques or name tags. It's about truth. And truth has a funny way of surviving. Silence. No one clapped. No one moved. Even Callie's face dropped the act for a split second. I handed the mic back, turned, and walked off stage. Back at my table, Emmett looked up. Mom, what just happened? We told the truth, I said, sitting. Lark's eyes shimmered, even when they didn't want to hear it. Especially then. I laid the quilt across my lap. It grounded me, reminded me who I was doing this for. Later that night, once we were home and the kids were in bed, I sat at the dining table. I opened my laptop. The folder titled, Proof, stared back at me. I clicked it open, photos, scans, letters, screenshots. I started typing, drafting a post, one that wouldn't name names but wouldn't spare truths. I listed what I'd given, what had been taken, what would no longer be ignored. I picked up my phone and texted a few friends. Lunch next week. Let's talk truth. The quilt was still across my legs. Lark had placed it there before heading to her room. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Emmett walked in quietly, rubbing his eyes. Will they be mad, Mom? They already are, I said. But you're still gonna do it? Especially now. He nodded, turned, and padded back to bed. I stared out the window. The porch light was on, dim, flickering, but there. My phone buzzed. A reply to my text. I'm in. I whispered to no one. They thought silence meant surrender. And maybe once it did. But not anymore. Games changed. For good. The community hall parking lot was fuller than usual, headlights casting stretched shadows across the asphalt. I pulled in slowly, windows down just enough to let in the murmur of the crowd gathering inside. I had parked in this lot countless times, but never with this weight. Not shame, no, not anymore. Just a steady knowing. I wasn't walking in as the helper tonight. I was walking in as the one who remembered everything they hoped I'd forget. The quilt sat across my shoulders, not just warmth, but message. It didn't scream. It spoke softly but clearly, and that was louder than any voice could be. Maeve's words hung in my mind like breath on glass. You don't have to pick the side they picked for you. You pick your side. I had picked mine. It had taken me years, but I finally did. Lark and Emmett walked on either side of me, their hands brushing mine. They didn't ask questions tonight. They didn't need to. They knew this wasn't just another meeting. This was the last one we'd ever walk into needing to explain who we were. My phone buzzed. I looked down. A text from my mother. Coming to dinner after? Just family tonight. I didn't bother replying. Inside, the hall lights flickered low. Conversations dimmed. A hush fell, not from reverence, but from recognition. People saw me and suddenly remembered what they hadn't noticed all those years. That's how it works, I guess. You stay quiet long enough, they forget you can speak. The projector screen buzzed to life. The moderator called for community announcements. I stood up before anyone else could move. May I show something? I asked, walking to the stage. He hesitated, glanced at someone off to the side, then nodded. Go ahead. I clicked the remote. First slide, the family wall. The one they showed at last year's gala. Familiar names. Familiar lies. My name nowhere. Second slide, the real records. The ledger I had spent weeks piecing together. Letters, checks, memos, every thread that led to the truth. I spoke slowly, clearly. Some of you know this wall. Some of you helped build it. What you may not know is that not all names were included. Not all hands were honored. Some of us were rewritten right out of the story. I saw Elaine stiffen, arms crossed tight. Callie's face turned the kind of pale that follows too much foundation and not enough conviction. You told me I was the daughter not worth mentioning. That the best I could do was applaud from the crowd while you clapped for yourselves, I said, keeping my eyes on them. Well, I stopped waiting for crumbs. I baked my own table. And tonight, I'm eating at it. Silence. Then, a clap. Then another. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. I stepped down from the stage. For the first time, not needing a title to be heard. Afterward, they came in waves. Quiet words, firm handshakes, tight nods. Thank you. You said what we all think. About time someone spoke up. My mother came last. Purse clutched like it was holding something valuable. She stood close, whispered, "We can talk, Venora." I didn't flinch. We already did. Tonight just came with a microphone. She blinked fast, then turned and walked away. Just like always, retreat when the narrative doesn't fit. Across the room, Callie called my name once. I turned. She didn't say anything else. Just shook her head and walked off. I let her go. Lark tugged on the quilt, now wrapped around her shoulders. "Was that okay?" she asked. "It was necessary," I said. Back home, the air smelled like rosemary and something slightly burnt. Comforting, in a way only imperfection can be. I hung the quilt in the living room. Not as a trophy, as a ledger. The kids sat nearby, quietly drawing. "What happens now?" Emmett asked. "Now we build," I said. "We build with people who value us. We make room for them at our table. And we don't wait for anyone to invite us somewhere we're not welcome." Later, I sat at the dining table, alone with the glow of my laptop. I typed the first words of something new. Something that was finally mine. Blanche Family Foundation. Equal opportunity starts at home. The name felt right. Not loud, but real. I paused, fingers resting on the keys. Thought of that quote again, "You don't demand a seat when you bring the chairs." It landed different now. It wasn't anger. It was arrival. Near midnight, the kids were asleep, the house was quiet. I stood by the window, eyes drifting across the yard. The porch light at my childhood home glowed in the distance. It had always felt like a lighthouse. Now it looked more like a street lamp, just another bulb in a row of bulbs. I turned away from the window. Whispered into the stillness, "We're not waiting anymore." The car engine turned. The screen faded to black. The sunlight that poured into the kitchen wasn't filtered through stained glass windows or softened by expensive curtains. It was raw, warm, honest. I moved quietly, placing mismatched mugs on the breakfast table, each one chipped in a different spot, each with its own little story. The bowls were hand-painted, bright with lopsided hearts and crooked initials. Emmett's were bold, Lark's delicate. Nothing matched, and that was the point. This house was new, not in bricks or beams, but in purpose. No ghosts of Sunday fights over who got the bigger slice of pie. No silence so loud you could hear it pressing against the walls. Here, I wasn't afraid of weekends anymore. I laid the last fork down, paused, and looked around. Maeve arrived a minute later, holding cinnamon rolls she didn't ask me permission to bring. She didn't need to. She wasn't blood, but she was family now. The kids came tumbling out of the kitchen laughing, covered in flour from something that never quite became pancakes. I didn't scold. I just laughed with them. The kind of laugh that doesn't ask for approval. Later that morning, after everyone cleared out and the plates sat drying on the rack, I opened my old journal. It had been years since I'd written anything. But today, I flipped to a fresh page. Day 1. I choose me. And those who choose me back. That was all. I closed the book and looked up at the sunlight again. We weren't hiding anymore. I sat down with my laptop and opened a folder I'd ignored too long. Messages from my mother. Some long, some angry. One full of excuses, the others full of silence. I listened to one. Just one. She said she missed the kids. That maybe we misunderstood. I hit delete. Then, I typed a reply. Just one line. I forgive you, but I won't forget. My kids deserve better than, maybe next time. Then I cleared the folder. I opened another drawer and pulled out a box. Inside were heirlooms passed down, doilies, brooches, old letters I used to think were sacred. Now, they felt like anchors. I boxed them up and donated them that same afternoon. What was I holding on to? Weight without worth. I met Carol, a family friend I hadn't seen in years, for coffee. She asked how I'd been. I smiled, told her the truth, and when she began poking into the past, I changed the subject. I paid the bill and said goodbye, feeling lighter for drawing that line. My ex showed up at the school science fair the next week. He smiled too much, tried too hard. I nodded politely, took a few photos with the kids, and when he left, I didn't watch him go. At home, I clicked through my calendar and saw it still there, Sunday family dinner, recurring. I stared at it, hovered the mouse, then clicked delete. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, clean. That night, I sat the kids down at the kitchen table. The same one we'd painted together over summer. I said, I want to talk about family. They both looked up. Family, I said, isn't who shares your last name. It's who shows up. It's who hears you, who holds space for you. Lark tilted her head. Is that why Grandma didn't want us at the front table? I breathed in. Some people never learn how to see past what they were taught. That's not your job to fix. That's theirs. Emmett frowned. But we didn't do anything wrong. No, I said, you didn't, and you don't need to prove your worth to people who can't see it. Then I brought out the jar. Just a simple mason jar with a label, kindness. Every time someone in this house does something thoughtful, we write it down and put it in here. They lit up. I turned to Emmett. You are not crumbs, baby. You are the whole meal. And one day, you're gonna feed others with love so big it won't fit on any plate. They wrote the first notes right away. Helped Mom with dishes. Made Lark laugh when she was sad. We framed a mission statement together that night. It's still on the wall. We show up. We speak kindly. We build love, not walls. Days passed. Weeks, maybe. Then I found myself on stage again, not in defiance, but in purpose. A neighborhood event. Small. Folding chairs and lemonade. They asked me to speak. I told my story. Some cried. Others just nodded. You can always tell who's lived it. I started volunteering with a youth group, mentoring kids who felt invisible at home. I didn't talk down to them. I just listened. One of them said, nobody's ever asked me what I want before. I said, then let's start there. One Saturday, my cousin Jules came by. We hadn't spoken since she walked away from the family, too. We hugged in the driveway. She said, I thought it was just me. Nope, I said. Turns out, there's a lot of us. Together, we threw a cookout. No fine china, no pecking order, just ribs, potato salad, music. Found family, laughing like we'd been doing it for years. That night, the kids gave me a scrapbook. Photos from this past year. No grandparents, no hand-me-down holidays. Just our own milestones, our own joy. On the last page, in Emmett's crooked handwriting, thanks for building this. Later, I read Maya Angelou again. The line I kept close, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. And finally, I believed it. That next morning, I stood out on the porch, mug in hand, steam rising as the sun broke through. The kids were still asleep. The house quiet. I whispered to the breeze, I used to ask, why not me? Now I ask, what's next? My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I saw your story. I think I'm ready to speak up too. I stared at it for a second, then typed back. I'll be here when you are.